It's time to spill the race day tea. It's been a little over a week since I ran my very first race after a year on my Learn to Run journey. And I wanted to sit down today and spill all of the tea on how it went, how I felt, what I did, and answer all of the amazing questions that you guys asked me so that you can hopefully feel a little bit less anxious going into your first race. At least hopefully a little bit less anxious than I did. So let's start with the numbers because I know that's what everybody wants to know. This was the second time that I have ever ran 10 kilometers at once. I've ran a couple of 8Ks leading up to the race, but I really didn't know how this was going to go, to be brutally honest. I was injured, so I've been experiencing some like tendonitis in the sides of my ankles and my peroneals, and I basically just had the goal that I wanted to finish it. I didn't care how long it would take. I didn't care if I PB'd, but I ended up getting a PB and beat my first 10K time by 20 minutes, which is insane. So the race took me just over an hour and a half. I ended up with like a 9:42 pace, and that's in kilometers. For anybody that is new here, I am a slow runner. So this was definitely a lot faster for me. The plan was for me to try to run the first 5 kilometers quite a bit slower than I typically would. That way I still had gas in the tank for the last half. It didn't really go as planned, and that's fine. Like, it's, for me, like I said, it was more just about like finishing it and like getting over the anxiety of running with other people and having that first race experience and letting myself enjoy it. So this question asks, what do you attribute your faster pace to? That PB is huge. Honestly, I feel like just because I was so anxious and because I wanted to get it over with, I ended up doing like really loose intervals because I found it was really hard to run slowly and just kind of like ran faster than I typically would have and then would take walking breaks when I needed to. I originally set out to have them set up on my watch, but I just didn't want to overcomplicate it. I wanted to just enjoy it, and I feel like just letting myself listen to my body was really key. And I also benefited a lot from like the lack of running over the couple of weeks before the race. That was just basically because of my tendonitis, but it ended up being really helpful because it gave my calves time to rest. Also fueling properly. I made sure that I had like energy gummies, made sure that I fueled properly the night before the race, made sure that I fueled properly in the morning. I had some electrolytes, and I just didn't get in my own head about it. Did you run the whole time or did you do intervals? Like I said, I did like loose intervals. I did not run the whole time. I had no intentions to run the whole time. I feel like for me, that I just wasn't at that point in my training because of all of the injuries that I have. And I didn't want to put any extra pressure on myself. Did you eat beforehand? I never know what to eat before my runs. Yes, I had oatmeal, protein oatmeal with some peanut butter about an hour and a half before the race. I also brought one of the Honey Stinger waffles and some of the little energy chews. Didn't end up having the waffle because it was a shorter run, and I felt like because I was already so anxious, like that was kind of like the adrenaline that I needed. But I did have an energy chew every 30 minutes. I started early, that way I wouldn't hit a wall, basically. My recommendation is carbs and protein. If you're gonna eat something heavier, typically an hour and a half to 2 hours before is what works for me. Your body will be different than everybody else's, so try lots of different things during the lead up to the race. How did you find running with other people? I'm so scared. I am an independent runner. I've never been to a run club. I've only ever ran with another person once. That's what I was the most nervous about for this entire experience. It wasn't, I knew I could finish it. I knew I would walk if I had to. More so, I was just nervous about running with other people and being around other people. It honestly was not as nerve-wracking as I thought it was going to be, but I did start at the very back, and I felt like because I placed myself appropriately, I wasn't like nervous about what the people around me were thinking about me. And also just remembering that like everybody is there to do the same thing. I do feel like doing this race was a really good experience for me because I'm not as nervous to run with other people now. Like I feel like I really ripped the band-aid off. What shoes did you end up wearing? You may have seen that I started a race day shoe series where my plan was to go through all of my running shoes before I decided what race day shoes I wanted to wear. But because I am a creature of habit and because my anxiety was so high, I ended up just going with my absolute go-tos, the Nike Invincible 3s. Nike had actually sent me a new pair of them about 3 or 4 days before the race, but I was too nervous to wear them, and I know you're really not supposed to race in new shoes, so I ended up just wearing my old beat up Invincible 3s. They were filthy, but it made me feel more comfortable knowing that I had ran in them so many times. Did you feel the nerves of maybe being the last over the line? It's stopping me. No, I picked this race specifically because the 10K, the half marathon, and the marathon were all starting at the same time. And yes, that is a little nerve-wracking, but it's also really nice knowing that like there are going to be people that of course will take longer to do their marathon and their half marathon than I would do a 10K. Their pace may be a lot quicker, but like obviously it's still going to take them more time to complete that. So that was really nice knowing that like I wouldn't have to be worried of people like waiting around for me to finish and like, you know, getting to different places and things being packed up and stuff like that. I also specifically picked this race because both the 10K and the half marathon were walk runs, which meant that basically like, you know, you were more than welcome to walk the entire course if you wanted to. How long was your long run leading up to your 10K and how did it compare with the 10? The way that my original training plan progressed is it was basically just adding a kilometer each week to each of my long runs. I ended up doing a lot of 8Ks because I feel like for me that was like enough. It was long and it was hard, but honestly like there is really no difference between the 8K and the 10K. I know there is, like I understand that there is, but like I felt like the 10K on race day went by significantly faster than any of the 8Ks that I have ran. I feel like 7 and 8K is a really tough distance for me. I really get in my head like once we get past the 6K mark. So I enjoyed the 10K run significantly more, and I also really felt like it went by so quickly because I was doing those like loose intervals. What was your strategy when things got tough or negative in your head? And that kind of coincides with what was the hardest part and how did you get through it? I would say the spot from 5K to 6K was the most difficult part for me because it was really heavily populated. The way that the course went, I was passing, so like people were on one side and I was on the other side. And I feel like that was kind of when like the self-doubt starts to creep in because like you see these like half marathon and marathon runners and they're like so fast and like I'm just jogging along, you know? I feel like that was really tough. It was also like a little bit uphill. And at that point my calves were starting to ache and I didn't want to stop to stretch them out. I ended up stopping at like 8.5K to stretch them out because I knew I wanted to try to push those last like kilometer and a half-ish. But there are a couple things that I did to distract myself. One, I kept repeating those mantras that I, you know, am all about all the time. And I started playing the alphabet game. So basically the way that that works, if you have never played the alphabet game, is like you start at A and then you find something that you can see that starts with an A. I had to skip a lot of letters because I was getting really frustrated. But I think I got to like that really helped distract me. And I also started counting to 20 because I know that like pain comes in waves. So like I would, you know, count to 20, start over, count to 20 again, start over, count to 20 again, until honestly I got like distracted enough that I forgot where I was at. And then usually that kind of like got me out of like the pain cave. And then the other thing is, of course, I would just walk if it was too bad. Like if I was like really gassed and out of breath, I would just take a little break, have a sip of water, pop an energy chew if I needed to, change the song. I feel like that's really helpful when you're like freaking out and like things are really tough, like changing the song and putting on like a real good banger. That definitely helps get you through it as well. Did you struggle to sleep afterwards and how did you recover after the race? Yes, I was exhausted. Like we really didn't sleep well the 2 nights leading up to the race. So like honestly, I was operating on like a few hours of sleep and I thought that I would come back from the race and just crash. But what really tripped me up is that it was so early. I'm not used to running running early. I'm used to running in like the evening. So we went back to the hotel and like relaxed and like, you know, I stretched and like did foam rolling, tried to make sure that I was like pounding the hydration into myself, like electrolytes, got some food in me to try to like start like the recovery process. But I definitely struggled with sleep for the first couple of days. Like I really couldn't get my brain to settle enough to like sleep properly. How were your calves and peroneals? My calves were tight, as they always are, especially because I was running a little bit faster, but I actually shockingly had no peroneal pain. And I don't know if that's because I was doing like the walking intervals or because I rest them before the race. I taped my arches up, I taped, you know, my feet, but I didn't have any pain, and that was a huge win for me. Best and worst part of race day. The best part was also the worst part, and that's like that pre-race anxiety jitters that you have like standing in the crowd. There's a lot of people around, there's a lot of stuff going on, it's very loud, and I feel like the anxiety kind of like got the best of me, but it was also like exhilarating. It definitely was not as scary as I thought it was gonna be. I feel like if I would have went into it with like, you know, an ideal pace in mind or things like that, that would have changed things a lot because I'm so hard on myself. But because I was just focused on finishing it, I feel like I didn't really have a negative part. What's next for you, and did you immediately sign up for another running event? Yes, but not an in-person event. I hate running in the heat. It's really not my jam, and I didn't want to put crazy pressure on myself to like do another distance run. I signed up for a virtual 6K. I think it's at like the end of July. And basically what virtual means is that like you can complete it anywhere, but you still get like a medal and stuff. So you do have to pay for it. A lot of people are probably like, why would you pay for that? But honestly, I just want the medal. I'm addicted to medals now, and I want all of the medals I can get. It goes really hand in hand with the next phase of my training plan, which is like trying to see if I can be a little fast. That's for me. So I'm going to be working a lot on like speed sessions and like improving my 5K time. So 6K I felt like was a really good distance because it's a little bit more than a 5K. I would say 6K honestly is probably my favorite distance to run. So that's it. That's the recap of my very first 10K race. I feel like I am a runner now. So this is your sign. If you are somewhat interested in signing up for races, do it. If that's not your jam, that's fine. Don't feel pressure, but I definitely recommend, especially if you have like a goal in mind, you have a distance in mind, you have something that you want to like push yourself to reach, I definitely recommend taking the plunge and signing up.